August Tate tightened his grip on his daughter's small hand as they walked down the dimly lit street. The worn-out soles of his boots scuffed against the pavement, but he barely noticed. His focus was on making sure 8-year-old Maddie was safe beside him. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" Maddie asked, her blue eyes wide with hope. August forced a smile. "Next time, sweetheart. We've got to save our treat money for rent this month." Maddie nodded, understanding far beyond her years, but before August could feel too guilty, a sharp voice sliced through the evening air. "You think you can just walk away from me?" August's head snapped toward the commotion. A man in an expensive navy suit had grabbed a woman's wrist, his grip tight enough that she winced. The woman, tall, elegant, and dressed in a sleek black dress, tried to pull away, her expression calm but her eyes filled with anger. "I told you I'm not interested," she said, her voice steady. The man yanked her closer. "You'll regret this." That was all August needed to hear. Without thinking, he stepped forward, placing Maddie behind him. "Let her go." The man turned, eyes narrowing as he took in August's faded jeans and work-worn hands. He scoffed. "This isn't your business." August didn't budge. "You're hurting her." "Let her go." The woman looked at August, surprise flashing across her face. She didn't seem like someone who was used to being defended by strangers. The man's lip curled in disdain. "Do you know who I am?" "No," August said, "and I don't care." The man let out a bitter laugh before shoving the woman's arm away. "She's not worth the trouble anyway," he muttered before storming off. August turned to the woman. "Are you okay?" She rubbed her wrist. "I am now." "Thank you." Maddie peeked out from behind August. That man was mean. The woman's tense expression softened as she knelt to Maddie's level. "He was, but your dad is very brave," Maddie beamed. "I know." August ran a hand through his dark hair, suddenly feeling awkward. "Do you need a ride somewhere, or a phone to call someone?" The woman straightened, studying him for a moment. "I'll be fine, but can I buy you both ice cream as a thank you?" August hesitated. He was used to doing everything on his own, never accepting help. But Maddie's hopeful gaze made the decision for him. "All right," he said, "but just this once." The woman smiled, a real, genuine smile. "I'm Gwendolyn Fairchild." August shook her hand, noting how soft her skin was compared to his calloused fingers. "August Tate." And with that, the night took a turn he never could have expected. Gwendolyn led them to an upscale cafe on the corner, its large windows glowing with warm light. Inside, the scent of freshly baked pastries and melting chocolate filled the air. A well-dressed hostess greeted them, her eyes widening slightly at August's worn-out boots and Maddie's scuffed sneakers, but Gwendolyn's presence silenced any hesitation. "3 ice creams, please," Gwendolyn said as they settled into a corner booth. She turned to Maddie. "What flavor do you like best?" Maddie's eyes flickered between the options listed on the menu. "I've never had anything fancy before," she admitted. Gwendolyn's expression softened. "Then you should try a little of everything." She signaled the server. "1 of each flavor, please." August opened his mouth to protest, but Gwendolyn shook her head. "It's a thank you, August. Let me do this," he exhaled, leaning back against the cushioned seat. "You don't owe me anything." She tilted her head. "That's not how gratitude works." Maddie, completely unaware of the undercurrent between them, swung her legs happily beneath the table. "Are you a princess?" she asked Gwendolyn. August choked on his water. "Maddie," Gwendolyn laughed, a rich, melodic sound that caught August off guard. "No, but I suppose some people think of me that way." Maddie considered this. "You look like one." The server arrived, placing bowls of colorful scoops in front of them. Maddie's face lit up, and she wasted no time digging in. August watched her for a moment before turning back to Gwendolyn. "That man from earlier, who was he?" She stirred her spoon through her bowl before answering. "A business associate, or he used to be. He didn't take rejection well." August frowned. "He didn't seem like someone who hears no very often." Gwendolyn's gaze darkened slightly. "He doesn't." "Which is exactly why I needed to say it." August studied her, noticing the way her fingers curled slightly against the table's edge. There was something she wasn't saying, but he didn't press. He knew what it was like to carry burdens in silence. Instead, he changed the subject. "So what do you do?" She hesitated for only a fraction of a second before responding. "I run a company." August raised an eyebrow. "That's vague," she smiled. "It's complicated." He decided not to push. He wasn't one to pry into things that weren't his business. Maddie, however, had no such reservations. "Do you have a castle?" Gwendolyn laughed again. "Not exactly." August chuckled. "You're going to have to be careful or she'll start calling you Queen Gwendolyn." Gwendolyn tapped her spoon against her chin. "I don't hate the sound of that," Maddie grinned. "Do you have a prince?" August stiffened slightly, but Gwendolyn only leaned forward, resting her chin in her palm. "No prince," she said lightly. Maddie pointed her spoon at her father. "Daddy's strong." "You should pick him." August groaned, covering his face with one hand. "Maddie." Gwendolyn didn't laugh this time. Instead, she looked at August with something unreadable in her expression. "He certainly is." August cleared his throat. "We should probably head home." "Maddie's got school in the morning." Gwendolyn looked disappointed but nodded. "Of course." As they stepped outside, the night air was crisp, a stark contrast to the warmth of the cafe. Maddie yawned, rubbing her eyes. "Can I give you both a ride?" Gwendolyn asked. August shook his head. "We're close, walking's fine." She hesitated, then reached into her small purse and pulled out a card, "In case you ever need anything." August took it, glancing at the name embossed in gold, Fairchild Industries. His gaze lifted to hers, realization flickering in his eyes. She wasn't just wealthy, she was Fairchild wealthy, one of the most powerful families in the country. Gwendolyn saw the change in his expression and smiled, but there was something almost hesitant in it. "Good night, August," she said softly. As she stepped into a sleek black car that had been waiting at the curb, August watched the taillights disappear into the distance. Maddie tugged on his hand. She was nice. August nodded, slipping the card into his pocket. "Yeah," he murmured. She was. August sat on the worn-out couch in his modest apartment, staring at the card Gwendolyn had handed him. The name Fairchild carried more weight than he was comfortable with. He had spent years keeping his world small, focused on Maddie, on survival. People like Gwendolyn Fairchild lived in a different universe, one filled with power and privilege. He should have tossed the card aside and forgotten about that night. And yet, he hadn't. Maddie's soft breathing came from the other end of the couch, where she had fallen asleep curled up against his side. He adjusted the thin blanket over her, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. His daughter was his entire world, and he had promised himself he'd never do anything to disrupt the fragile stability he had built for her. But Gwendolyn had already disrupted something in him. He tucked the card away and dismissed the thought. It wasn't like he'd ever see her again. The next afternoon, August was hauling bags of cement at the construction site where he worked when a sleek black car pulled up near the entrance. The other workers paused, some wiping sweat from their brows, others exchanging curious glances. Nobody in their world drove cars like that. August dropped the bag he was carrying just as the door opened and Gwendolyn stepped out. She was dressed differently than the night before: sleek trousers, a tailored coat, heels that shouldn't have belonged anywhere near dirt and gravel. But she walked across the uneven ground like she owned it, her confidence effortless. "August," she called, completely ignoring the way every set of eyes in the vicinity had turned toward her. He wiped his hands on his jeans and met her halfway. "Miss Fairchild," he said, keeping his voice neutral. Her lips twitched just slightly. "We're back to formalities now," he exhaled. "What are you doing here? I wanted to see you." A few of his coworkers let out low whistles behind him, but he ignored them. "Why?" She tilted her head. "You didn't use the card I gave you. I didn't need anything." She studied him for a moment before she spoke again. "I have a proposition." He crossed his arms. "I don't do favors for rich people." Her gaze didn't waver. "It's not a favor, it's a job." That caught him off guard. She continued, "I need someone I can trust." His jaw tightened. "Trust for what?" "There's a gala this weekend," she said. "I need a date, a real one, not another businessman who sees me as an acquisition." He let out a short laugh. "You want me to play dress up and pretend I belong in your world?" "I don't want you to pretend anything," she said simply. "I want you to be exactly who you are. That's what makes this different." There was something in her voice, something honest. She wasn't playing games. She was offering something real, as strange as it seemed. Still, his mind was already forming objections. He didn't belong at high society events. He had responsibilities. He had Maddie. As if reading his thoughts, she added, "I've already arranged for a professional sitter for Maddie. Someone safe, someone experienced. She'll be in good hands." He blinked. "You just assumed I'd say yes." "I assumed you'd hesitate," she admitted, "but I also assumed that, deep down, you'd at least consider it." She wasn't wrong. His life had been the same routine for years' work: Maddie, bills, exhaustion. Nothing outside the lines. Maybe just once he could step outside them. He exhaled sharply. "Fine. But only because Maddie will never forgive me if I turn down someone who buys one of every flavor." Gwendolyn's smile was slow but real. "I'll send a suit to your apartment." "I don't need," she held up a hand. "You do. And before you argue, consider it a loan, if that makes you feel better." He shook his head, still not entirely sure what he was getting himself into. But when she turned and walked back to her car, he realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to something. August stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of the crisp black suit that had arrived at his apartment earlier that day. The fabric was finer than anything he had ever worn, tailored to fit him perfectly. He barely recognized himself. "Daddy, you look like a prince," Maddie said from behind him, her small hands pressed together as she admired him. He turned, laughing softly. "I don't know about that, sweetheart," she nodded seriously. "You do, like the ones in the movies. The ones who dance with princesses." His chest tightened at her words, but before he could respond, a knock echoed through the small apartment. He opened the door to find a professional-looking woman standing there, the babysitter Gwendolyn had arranged. Maddie ran to grab her favorite stuffed bunny, already bubbling with excitement at the idea of having someone new to talk to. August gave the sitter a few instructions before stepping outside, where a sleek black car waited at the curb. He barely had time to process before the driver opened the door for him. Inside, Gwendolyn was waiting. She wore an evening gown of deep sapphire, the fabric clinging to her frame before flowing elegantly to the floor. A delicate diamond necklace rested against her collarbone, catching the dim light. But it wasn't the dress or the jewels that held August's attention, it was the way she looked at him. "You clean up well," she said, her voice carrying an edge of something softer than amusement. "You don't look so bad yourself," he admitted. She smiled, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with something neither of them acknowledged. Then the car pulled away from the curb, taking them toward a world August had never stepped into before. The gala was held in a grand estate, its massive chandeliers casting golden light over the elegantly dressed crowd. August followed Gwendolyn inside, feeling every pair of eyes flick toward him. He was used to being invisible, to blending into the background. But now, standing beside Gwendolyn, he was anything but. "Just stay close," she murmured, her fingers brushing against his wrist. "They'll stare, but they won't say anything to me. Because you're Gwendolyn Fairchild. Because I don't let them." He believed her. A waiter passed by, and before August could react, Gwendolyn plucked a glass of champagne from the tray and handed it to him. "Try not to look like you're sizing up an escape route," she teased. He exhaled through his nose. "I'm not used to this." She tilted her head, studying him. "Would it help if I told you that? Neither am I." He gave her a doubtful look. She laughed softly. "I know what they expect of me. I know the moves I'm supposed to make, but I don't belong to them, not really." The words settled in his chest in a way he didn't fully understand. Before he could respond, a voice cut through the hum of conversation. "Gwendolyn." August turned to see a man approaching, his sharp gaze flicking over him before settling on her. Recognition sparked. This was the same man from the street that night. August tensed instinctively, but Gwendolyn placed the slightest pressure on his arm, a silent reassurance. "Thorn," she said coolly. Thorn's lips pressed into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I was surprised to hear you brought a guest tonight." "Then you don't know me as well as you think," she replied. Thorn's gaze flickered toward August again, assessing, calculating. "You certainly have a taste for the unexpected." August held his stare, unwavering. He had spent years around men who thought their wealth made them untouchable. He wasn't impressed. "If you're done," Gwendolyn said, her voice edged with steel, "I have no interest in entertaining you further." Thorn's expression darkened just slightly, but he inclined his head. "As you wish." As soon as he walked away, August leaned down, voice low. "That guy is bad news." "I know," she said simply. He shook his head. "Then why? Because in my world, you don't always get to choose who you cross paths with." He hated that answer. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Come with me." He let her lead him through the crowd, through corridors lined with towering windows, until they stepped onto a balcony overlooking the sprawling gardens below. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of roses. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Are you regretting this yet?" "No," he answered immediately. That seemed to surprise her. "No," he exhaled, running a hand over the back of his neck. "I won't lie and say I fit in here, but I don't regret coming with you." Something shifted in her eyes. August, he didn't know who moved first, but suddenly she was in his arms. The distance between them disappeared, her hands resting against his chest, his fingers ghosting over the fabric of her dress. "I don't know what this is," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I know I don't want it to end tonight." Her breath hitched. "Neither do I." And then she kissed him. The world, the gala, the expectations, all of it faded. There was only her, only this moment. When they finally pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, her breath warm against his skin. "You've ruined me," she murmured. He let out a rough laugh. "I think you've got that backwards." She smiled against his lips. "Stay in my world a little longer, August." He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for tonight, he wasn't going anywhere. The car ride back was quiet, but not in an uncomfortable way. Gwendolyn's fingers rested lightly against August's, tracing absent patterns against his skin. It was a small thing, but it sent a warmth through him that he wasn't ready to examine too closely. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this car, not in this world, not with a woman like Gwendolyn Fairchild looking at him like he was something more than just a man struggling to get by. And yet, here he was. As the driver pulled up in front of his apartment building, August hesitated. The night still clung to him, electric and unreal, and stepping out of the car felt like stepping back into a life that suddenly didn't fit quite right. Gwendolyn turned to him, her voice softer now. "Would it be selfish of me to ask you to stay a little longer?" His breath came slower, measured. "Maddie's waiting for me." She nodded, but there was something in her expression, something hesitant. "I understand." He reached for the door handle, but her fingers tightened around his. "August." He turned back. She searched his face as if trying to decide something. Then with quiet determination she said, "Come to lunch with me tomorrow." He exhaled, shaking his head with a small, rueful chuckle. "You don't give up, do you? Not when I want something." Her honesty was disarming. "All right," he found himself saying. "But only lunch." Her smile was slow, deliberate. Only lunch. And yet, something told him this was just the beginning. The next afternoon, August found himself at a restaurant that probably cost more per meal than he made in a week. It was the kind of place with white tablecloths, waiters who moved like ghosts, and menus without prices. He rolled his shoulders, resisting the urge to tug at the collar of his shirt. Maddie had insisted on helping him pick something nicer than his usual work clothes, and he wasn't about to argue with her enthusiasm. Gwendolyn was already waiting when he arrived, her posture effortlessly elegant. She looked up as he approached, and there it was again, that quiet, unreadable expression that made him feel like she saw straight through him. "Did you have trouble finding the place?" she asked. "I think the valet was afraid I was lost," she laughed, but there was something knowing in her eyes. "You don't have to be uncomfortable, August." He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "That's easy for you to say." Her expression sobered slightly. "I don't belong here any more than you do." He gave her a skeptical look. "You own half this city." "That doesn't mean I fit into it." The words settled between them, weighty and unexpected. Before he could respond, a voice interrupted. "I thought I recognized you." August turned, instantly on edge. Thorne stood beside their table, his expression smug, his presence unwelcome. Gwendolyn's posture stiffened. "We're having lunch, Thorne. Whatever you want can wait." Thorne ignored her, his gaze settling on August. "You're persistent, I'll give you that." August's jaw clenched. "I don't know what you think is happening here, but I'm not playing whatever game you've got in mind." Thorne let out a low chuckle. "Oh, I think you are, you just don't realize it yet." "Leave," Gwendolyn said, her voice sharp. Thorne studied her for a long moment before inclining his head. "Enjoy your lunch." As soon as he walked away, August exhaled slowly. "I don't like him." "You're not supposed to," he shook his head. "What does he want from you?" Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. "Control," August frowned. "He doesn't seem like the kind of man who gives up easily." "He isn't." A beat of silence passed before she looked up at him, her gaze steady. "But neither am I." Something in his chest tightened. He had stepped into her world without meaning to. Now he wasn't sure he could walk away. Later that evening, August sat on the couch in his apartment, Maddie curled up beside him, her head resting against his arm. The television played quietly in the background, but his mind was elsewhere. Gwendolyn's words echoed in his head. "I don't belong here any more than you do." Control. Thorne wasn't just an ex-business associate, he was something more, something dangerous. And August had the sinking feeling that if he stayed in Gwendolyn's orbit, he was going to find out just how deep that danger went. But when his phone buzzed and he saw her name on the screen, he didn't hesitate before answering. "August," she said, her voice softer now. "I need to see you," he exhaled. "Where?" "My place." He hesitated for only a moment before standing. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be undone. And he was about to cross one more. August stepped out of the cab, his gaze sweeping over the towering glass structure before him. Gwendolyn's penthouse sat at the pinnacle of the city, a world away from the modest apartment he called home. He had hesitated before coming, but the urgency in her voice had left him with no choice. The doorman recognized his name and ushered him inside without question. The private elevator carried him to the top floor in silence, his pulse steady despite the unfamiliar opulence surrounding him. When the doors slid open, Gwendolyn stood waiting. She had changed from the elegance of earlier into something softer, a silk robe draped over her frame, her bare feet silent against the marble floors. Gone was the poised, untouchable woman the world knew. In her place stood someone raw, vulnerable. August stepped forward. "What happened?" she exhaled, leading him inside. The penthouse was vast, a sleek blend of glass and steel, but it didn't feel like a home. There were no personal touches, no warmth. It was more of a statement than a sanctuary. She moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city lights. Thorne isn't going to stop. August already knew that. What did he do? He's been pushing for a merger between our companies. A move that would give him access to Fairchild Industries in ways I can't allow. Her reflection in the glass was tense. I refused. He didn't take it well. August's jaw tightened. "Did he threaten you?" She turned to face him, something dark in her eyes. "Not directly. But I know the kind of man he is." August had seen enough to believe her. "So what do you need from me?" She hesitated. "I don't know." That honesty struck him harder than anything else. Gwendolyn Fairchild always had answers. The fact that she was unraveling in front of him meant something. He moved closer, gently tipping her chin up so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "You do know." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, her hands fisted in the front of his shirt as if grounding herself. "I don't want to fight this alone anymore," she admitted. The weight of her words settled deep in his chest. "You're not alone," he said. Something flickered in her eyes, something fragile and fierce all at once. He didn't think, he just acted. His mouth found hers, the tension between them snapping like a cord pulled too tight. She melted into him, her fingers threading through his hair, pulling him closer. It wasn't just desire, it was something deeper, something inevitable. When they finally broke apart, her breath was uneven, her forehead resting against his. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. He brushed his thumb along her jaw. "Neither do I," she let out a soft, shaky laugh. "That makes two of us." He tightened his hold on her. "Then we figure it out together." For once, she didn't argue. The next few weeks were a storm. August found himself swept into Gwendolyn's world in ways he hadn't expected. He stood beside her at board meetings, watched as she fought off power plays with a sharpness that left men like Thorne scrambling. But behind closed doors, she was different. She let him see the cracks, let him hold her when the weight of it all became too much. And he, in turn, let her into his world. She spent evenings at his apartment, laughing as Maddie made her try peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the first time. She sat on his couch in her designer dresses, looking more at home there than she ever had in her penthouse. They had built something fragile but real, And then Thorne made his move. Gwendolyn stormed into August's apartment one evening, her face pale with fury. "He's trying to force my board into a vote," she said, pacing. "If he wins, I lose controlling interest." August stood, his expression dark. "How?" "He's been buying shares under shell corporations. He's closer than I realized." She turned to him, her voice raw. "If he succeeds, I'll lose everything." August's hands curled into fists. "Then we stop him." The gala was the perfect battleground. Thorne had gathered the city's most powerful figures, expecting to celebrate his victory before the vote was even cast. But Gwendolyn had other plans. She walked into the event with August at her side, her chin high, her confidence unwavering. Conversation quieted as they entered, eyes flicking between them. Thorne approached, a smug smile already forming. "Gwendolyn, I assume you've come to accept your loss with grace." She smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Not at all." Thorne's expression flickered. "The vote is secured. You can't stop it." She handed him a folder. "Actually, I can." He opened it, his face paling. "This is proof of your illegal acquisitions," she finished smoothly. "You manipulated the market. The SEC will be very interested." Thorne's jaw clenched. "You wouldn't." August stepped forward. "She already has." Thorne looked between them, realization dawning. "You played me." Gwendolyn tilted her head. "I learned from the best." Security arrived moments later, escorting Thorne out as the room erupted into whispers. Gwendolyn turned to August, something unreadable in her gaze. "It's over," she said. He exhaled. "You did it." She reached for his hand. "We did." The sun was rising when they finally escaped the chaos. They stood on the rooftop of her penthouse, looking out over the city. Gwendolyn turned to him, something quiet in her expression. "I don't want this to end." He cupped her face, brushing his thumb over her cheek. "Then it doesn't." Her breath hitched. "August," he pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "I never thought I'd belong in your world," he admitted. "But I don't care about that anymore. I just want to belong with you." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. "You already do." He slid the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he had everything he'd ever needed. Maddie was the flower girl at their wedding. And as August stood at the altar, watching Gwendolyn walk toward him, he knew this was forever.